Welcome to Tech with Kaushik. This is part 10 of our complete practice question series for the AZ-900 Microsoft Azure Fundamentals exam. Choose your answer before the timer ends. Then review the correct answer, detailed explanation, and exam tip. Let us begin part 10. Here comes question number 355. This one focuses on scalability. Here's what is happening. A database hosted on an Azure virtual machine is experiencing high utilization. The administrator decides to change the virtual machine size from 4 vCPUs and 16 GB of RAM to 8 vCPUs and 32 GB of RAM to handle the load. Which cloud concept does this action describe? The choices are: Option A, horizontal scaling. Option B, vertical scaling. Option C, high availability. Option D, elasticity. In this case, choose option B, vertical scaling. This is the best choice because vertical scaling, also called scaling up, increases the capacity of an existing resource by adding CPU, memory, or another resource dimension. A. Horizontal scaling adds more instances rather than increasing one instance. C. High availability focuses on minimizing downtime through redundancy. D. Elasticity is the ability to adjust capacity dynamically with demand and can use different scaling directions. The scenario specifically resizes 1 VM. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Scaling up or down changes the size of one resource. Scaling out or in changes the number of resource instances. Next up is question number 356. A small business is exploring the shift to cloud computing and wants to understand the baseline requirements and benefits. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement says, you must purchase and maintain your own physical server hardware to use Microsoft Azure public cloud services. The second statement says, you typically require internet connectivity to access and manage Azure public cloud resources. The third statement says, it generally requires less upfront capital investment to increase capacity in the public cloud than in an on-premises data center. Statement 1 should be marked no. In a public cloud, the cloud provider, Microsoft, owns and maintains all physical hardware. Statement 2 should be marked yes. Cloud services are accessed over a network, overwhelmingly via the internet or dedicated connections like ExpressRoute. Statement 3 should be marked yes. Expanding in the cloud leverages the OPX model, bypassing the capex required to buy physical servers for an on-premises data center. The public cloud uses an operational expenditure, OPX, model, meaning you pay for what you consume without buying physical hardware. Take a careful look at question number 357. Look for the most important clue in this scenario. A development team is selecting the best Azure compute services for various new projects. Match the Azure compute service to its primary description. First, review these entries. Left item 1, Azure virtual machines. Left item 2, Azure container instances. Left item 3, Azure App Service. Left item 4, Azure Functions. Here are the possible matches. Right option A provides a fully managed platform optimized for hosting web applications. Right option B provides an isolated, portable environment to run a single containerized application without managing underlying servers. Right option C provides event-driven, serverless compute to execute short-lived code snippets. Right option D provides complete control over the operating system via virtualization. Here are the correct matches. Pair Azure virtual machines and D provides complete control over the operating system via virtualization. Pair Azure container instances and B provides an isolated, portable environment to run a single containerized application without managing underlying servers. Pair Azure App Service and A provides a fully managed platform optimized for hosting web applications. Pair Azure Functions and C provides event-driven, serverless compute to execute short-lived code snippets. The main reason is these are the foundational definitions of Azure's primary compute offerings, distinguishing between IaaS, PaaS, containers, and serverless compute models. Here's a useful exam tip. Use App Service for web apps, container instances for isolated containers, functions for serverless event-driven code, and virtual machines when full OS control is needed. Let's work through question number 358. We are moving on to Defender for Cloud. Take a moment to review this scenario. A security team needs a service that assesses Azure workload security posture, provides prioritized recommendations, and summarizes posture with a secure score. Which Azure service provides these capabilities? Now let's review the options. Option A is Azure Firewall. Option B is Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Option C is Azure Front Door. Option D is Azure Bastion. Go with option B, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Let's look at the reasoning. Microsoft Defender for Cloud evaluates cloud resources and workloads, provides security recommendations, and uses secure score to summarize security posture. The remaining options can be eliminated because A. Azure Firewall filters network traffic. C. Azure Front Door provides global application delivery. D. Azure Bastion provides managed RDP and SSH connectivity to virtual machines. Exam tip. Choose Defender for Cloud for posture assessment, security recommendations, and secure score. Now for question number 359. Here's the scenario. A department needs an Azure boundary for separate billing and for assigning access to its resources. Which Azure hierarchy component provides this boundary? Here are the options. Choice A. An Azure subscription. Choice B. A resource group. Choice C. A management group. Choice D. An availability zone. The best choice is option A. An Azure subscription. This works because an Azure subscription is a billing and management boundary. Access can be assigned at subscription scope, and the subscription contains resource groups and resources. Here's why the alternatives are not suitable. B. A resource group organizes resources inside a subscription. C. A management group organizes subscriptions for governance. D. An availability zone is a fault isolation location within a region. A helpful shortcut is this. Management groups contain subscriptions, subscriptions contain resource groups contain resources. Question number 360. Next, let's move into availability zones. Consider this situation. A company is designing a critical application hosted on Azure virtual machines. The architecture must ensure that the application remains fully available even if an entire Azure data center loses power or network connectivity. Which feature should be used during deployment to meet this fault tolerance requirement? Choice A. Availability sets. Choice B. Virtual machine scale sets with uniform orchestration. Choice C. Availability zones. Choice D. Azure Spot virtual machines. The right response is option C, availability zones. Availability zones are physically separate data center groups within an Azure region, each with independent power, cooling, and networking. Distributing instances across zones protects against a zonal data center failure. Now let's rule out the other options. A. Availability sets reduce correlated hardware and maintenance failures but do not provide zonal data center isolation. B. A scale set provides scaling and instance management. Zonal protection requires explicit zone placement. D. Spot virtual machines can be evicted and are not intended for critical availability guarantees. The main takeaway is use availability zones for data center level fault isolation within a region. Question number 361. Needs a little extra thought. Pay close attention to what the scenario really requires. An IT administrator is documenting the hierarchy and management structure of the company's Azure environment. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. Multiple users can be assigned administrator permissions to manage the same Azure subscription. Statement 2. A single Azure resource group can contain resources spanning multiple Azure subscriptions. Statement 3. An Azure subscription can only be managed using a personal Microsoft account, for example, Outlook.com. The first statement is yes. Azure RBAC roles can be assigned to multiple users at subscription scope. The second statement is no, a resource group belongs to exactly one subscription. The third statement is no. Work or school identities in Microsoft Entra ID can manage subscriptions. Keep this point in mind for the exam. A resource group belongs to one subscription, and a subscription is associated with one Microsoft Entra tenant. Question number 362. Let's go. Your organization uses Azure SQL Database, a fully managed relational database service. Microsoft automatically handles the hardware provisioning, software patching, and backups for this service. Azure SQL Database is a classic example of which cloud service model? Choices. Option A. Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS. Option B. Platform as a Service, PaaS. Option C. Software as a Service, SaaS. Option D. Disaster Recovery as a Service, DRaaS. The answer here is option B, Platform as a Service, PaaS. Here's why. Platform as a Service, PaaS, provides a managed hosting environment where the cloud provider manages the underlying infrastructure, operating system, and database engine, while the customer manages the data and schema. Azure SQL Database is a PaaS offering. The other choices do not work because A. IaaS provides virtual hardware, requiring the customer to install and manage the database engine and operating system, for example, SQL Server on Azure virtual machines. C. SaaS delivers complete end-user applications, like Microsoft 365, not underlying database hosting platforms. D. DRaaS focuses specifically on replicating workloads for disaster recovery, not primary database hosting. If Azure manages the operating system and platform software, like the SQL engine, but you manage the data and code, it is Platform as a Service, PaaS. Here's an important one, question number 363. The focus now shifts to Microsoft Purview. The key situation is this. An organization needs to discover, classify, and govern sensitive data across its data estate. Which Microsoft service should the organization use? Focus on what separates these choices. Option A, Microsoft Purview. Option B, Azure Monitor. Option C, Microsoft Entra ID. Option D, Azure Service Health. Go with option A, Microsoft Purview. This is the best choice because Microsoft Purview provides data governance, data security, risk, and compliance capabilities that help organizations understand and protect data across their estate. Let's quickly check the incorrect choices. B. Azure Monitor collects and analyzes telemetry. C. Microsoft Entra ID provides identity and access management. D. Azure Service Health reports service issues, planned maintenance, and advisories. Here's a useful exam tip. Choose Microsoft Purview for discovering, classifying, governing, and protecting organizational data. Next up is question number 364. Consider this situation. A retail company processes customer orders using an application hosted in its own physical data center. During the holiday season, the company automatically provisions additional application servers in Microsoft Azure to handle the increased load. Which cloud deployment model does this scenario represent? Review the options. Option A, Public Cloud. Option B, Private Cloud. Option C, Hybrid Cloud. Option D, Multi-Cloud. In this case, choose option C, Hybrid Cloud. The main reason is a hybrid cloud model combines on-premises infrastructure, private, with public cloud resources, Azure, allowing workloads to shift or extend between them based on demand, often called cloud bursting. A purely public cloud relies entirely on resources owned by a third-party provider. B. A purely private cloud uses only resources dedicated to one organization, typically on-premises. D. Multi-cloud refers to using multiple different public cloud providers, not a mix of public and on-premises. Exam tip. Combining on-premises data centers with Azure services always describes a hybrid cloud architecture. Let's take a look at question number 365. This question takes us into Azure portal. Here's the situation to consider. An administrator wants a graphical, browser-based interface to create and manage Azure resources without installing local command line tools. Which Azure management tool should the administrator use? Let's compare the available options. Choice A, Azure PowerShell. Choice B, the Azure portal. Choice C, Azure CLI. Choice D, an ARM template. The right response is option B, the Azure portal. Let's look at the reasoning. The Azure portal is a browser-based graphical console for creating, configuring, monitoring, and managing Azure resources. The remaining options can be eliminated because A. Azure PowerShell is a command-line scripting environment. C. Azure CLI is a command-line tool. D. An ARM template is a declarative infrastructure as code file, not an interactive graphical interface. A helpful shortcut is this. Use the Azure portal for graphical management, Cloud Shell for browser-based commands, and ARM templates for repeatable deployments. Now let's examine question number 366. Let's start with the scenario. A security strategy requires every access request to be evaluated explicitly, grants only the minimum required permissions, and assumes that a breach may already exist. Which security model does this describe? Take a look at each choice. Option A is Zero Trust. Option B is the Shared Responsibility model. Option C is High Availability. Option D is Consumption-based pricing. The best choice is option A, Zero Trust. This works because Zero Trust is based on three principles: verify explicitly, use least privilege access, and assume breach. Here's why the alternatives are not suitable. B. Shared responsibility divides security duties between provider and customer. C. High availability concerns uptime and resilience. D. Consumption-based pricing concerns paying according to usage. The main takeaway is Zero Trust means verify explicitly, use least privilege, and assume breach. Now for question number 367. We are moving on to Azure policy. An organization must automatically prevent Azure resources from being deployed outside approved geographic regions. Which Azure governance service should the organization use? Choice A, Azure policy. Choice B, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Choice C, Azure Monitor. Choice D, the Azure Pricing Calculator. The answer here is option A, Azure policy. Azure policy evaluates resources against organizational rules and can deny deployments that do not meet requirements such as allowed locations. Now let's rule out the other options. B. Defender for Cloud assesses and improves security posture. C. Azure Monitor collects and analyzes telemetry. D. The pricing calculator estimates prospective costs. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Azure policy controls what configurations are allowed. Azure RBAC controls who can perform actions. See how you handle question number 368. Before choosing, identify the key constraint. An IT architect is categorizing solutions by cloud service type. Match each cloud service type to the appropriate solution. First, review the source list. The first source item is Software as a Service, SaaS. The second source item is Platform as a Service, PaaS. The third source item is Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS. Next, review where the items can go. Option A on the destination side is a customer relationship management system hosted by a vendor where users manage data and accounts. Option B on the destination side is a web application environment where developers deploy code without managing the underlying operating system. Option C on the destination side is a cloud virtual machine where the IT team manages the operating system and installs custom software. For mapping 1, connect Software as a Service, SaaS, with a customer relationship management system hosted by a vendor where users manage data and accounts. For mapping 2, connect Platform as a Service, PaaS, with B, a web application environment where developers deploy code without managing the underlying operating system. For mapping 3, connect Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS, with C, a cloud virtual machine where the IT team manages the operating system and installs custom software. Here's why. SaaS delivers a complete application, PaaS provides a managed platform for application code, and IaaS provides virtual infrastructure with customer control of the guest operating system. IaaS gives guest OS control, PaaS manages the platform for your code, and SaaS delivers a complete application. Let's continue with question number 369. This question takes us into cloud benefits. First, let's review the situation. Your organization is adopting cloud services and wants the team to recognize current cloud service benefits. Match each cloud benefit to the correct description. Let's start with the items you can move. Source 1, Scalability. Source 2, High Availability. Source 3, Manageability. These are the target requirements. Target A, increasing or decreasing resources to meet changes in demand. Target B, using redundancy so a service remains available when a component fails. Target C, provisioning, configuring, and monitoring cloud resources through portals, command line tools, or APIs. Match scalability to A, increasing or decreasing resources to meet changes in demand. Match high availability to B, using redundancy so a service remains available when a component fails. Match manageability to C, provisioning, configuring, and monitoring cloud resources through portals, command line tools, or APIs. This is the best choice because scalability adjusts capacity, high availability reduces downtime through redundancy, and manageability provides multiple ways to administer cloud resources. Here's a useful exam tip. Scalability concerns capacity, high availability concerns uptime, and manageability concerns how resources are administered. Here comes question number 370. Here's what is happening. An auditor must be able to view all resources in an Azure resource group but must not create, modify, or delete resources. Which built-in Azure role should you assign? The choices are: Option A, Reader. Option B, Contributor. Option C, Owner. Option D, User Access Administrator. In this case, choose Option A, Reader. The main reason is the reader role allows a user to view Azure resources without making changes. The other choices do not work because B, Contributor can create and manage resources. C, Owner can manage resources and assign access. D, User Access Administrator manages user access to Azure resources. Exam tip. Reader is view-only, Contributor manages resources, and Owner manages both resources and access. Now let's examine question number 371. First, let's review the situation. A research group needs Azure Compute for a short experiment and does not want a long-term commitment. Which cloud pricing model charges for resources as they are consumed? Here are the possible answers. Choice A, pay-as-you-go pricing. Choice B, a 3-year reservation. Choice C, an upfront hardware purchase. Choice D, a perpetual software license. Go with option A, pay-as-you-go pricing. Let's look at the reasoning. Pay-as-you-go is consumption-based pricing. Charges are based on the resources used during the billing period without requiring a long-term commitment. Let's quickly check the incorrect choices. B, a reservation exchanges a time commitment for discounted pricing. C, buying physical hardware is a capital expenditure rather than cloud consumption pricing. D, a perpetual license is not the standard consumption model for Azure resource usage. A helpful shortcut is this. Consumption-based pricing means paying for actual usage instead of purchasing infrastructure upfront. Question number 372. Here's the scenario. An administrator wants personalized notifications about Azure outages and planned maintenance that may affect the organization's subscriptions. Which Azure service should the administrator use? Review the options. Option A, Azure Service Health. Option B, Azure Advisor. Option C, Azure Policy. Option D, Microsoft Cost Management. The answer here is option A, Azure Service Health. This works because Azure Service Health provides a personalized view of service issues, planned maintenance, and advisories that can affect the Azure services and regions an organization uses. B. Azure Advisor provides optimization recommendations. C. Azure Policy evaluates and enforces resource compliance. D. Microsoft Cost Management analyzes and controls cloud spending. The main takeaway is Azure status is global, Azure service health is personalized to your subscriptions and services. Let's take a look at question number 373. The focus now shifts to Azure Cost Management. Here's the situation to consider. A finance manager is reviewing foundational Azure Cost Management concepts. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Now check statement 1. Azure costs can vary based on the resource type, usage, and Azure region. Now check statement 2. The Azure pricing calculator is primarily used to analyze historical charges after resources are deployed. Now check statement 3. Products obtained through Azure Marketplace can add charges beyond the underlying Azure infrastructure costs. The answer here is yes. Azure pricing depends on factors that include service type, consumption, region, and commercial terms. The answer here is no. The pricing calculator estimates anticipated costs before deployment. Cost management analyzes actual and forecasted spending. The answer here is yes. Marketplace software or services can have separate publisher charges in addition to Azure resource charges. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Use the pricing calculator before deployment and cost management after deployment. Let's work through question number 374. Take a moment to review this scenario. An instructor is teaching the cloud benefits listed in the current AZ-900 skills outline. Match each cloud benefit to its correct description. Here are the items on the left. Item 1 on the left is reliability. Item 2 on the left is predictability. Item 3 on the left is governance. Now look at the choices on the right. Right side choice A, using resilient design and recovery capabilities so a system can continue operating after failures. Right side choice B, forecasting expected performance and cost based on known patterns and tools. Right side choice C, using policies, standards, and controls to help resources meet organizational requirements. Let's review the completed pairs. Match reliability with A, using resilient design and recovery capabilities so a system can continue operating after failures. Match predictability with B, forecasting expected performance and cost based on known patterns and tools. Match governance with C, using policies, standards, and controls to help resources meet organizational requirements. Reliability concerns recovery and continued operation. Predictability concerns expected performance and cost, and governance concerns consistent organizational control. Reliability is about recovery, predictability is about expected outcomes, and governance is about enforcing organizational standards. Let's continue with question number 375. Next, let's move into Azure containers. Let's start with the scenario. A development team is comparing containers with virtual machines for application deployment. Which two characteristics are associated with containers? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Select two answers that satisfy the requirement. Now let's review the options. Option A is they package an application and its dependencies together. Option B is they share the host operating system kernel and can start quickly. Option C is each container requires a complete guest operating system. Option D is they provide a dedicated physical server for one customer. Option E is they can run only long-lived stateful applications. You should choose option A. They package an application and its dependencies together, and option B. They share the host operating system kernel and can start quickly. Here's why. Containers package application components consistently and use operating system level isolation, so they are generally lighter and faster to start than full virtual machines. The remaining options can be eliminated because C. A complete guest operating system is characteristic of a virtual machine, not each container. D. Dedicated physical hardware describes a dedicated host model, not containers. E. Containers can support many workload patterns and are not limited to long-lived stateful applications. Here's a useful exam tip. Containers share the host OS kernel. Virtual machines include a full guest OS. Next up is question number 376. Consider this situation. An organization wants to discover, classify, and govern data across its on-premises, multi-cloud, and software-as-a-service environments. Which Microsoft service is designed for this purpose? Here are the options. Choice A. Microsoft Purview. Choice B. Azure Monitor. Choice C. Azure Service Health. Choice D. Microsoft Entra ID. The right response is option A. Microsoft Purview. This is the best choice because Microsoft Purview provides data governance capabilities that help organizations discover, classify, understand, and manage data across their data estate. Here's why the alternatives are not suitable. B. Azure Monitor collects and analyzes operational telemetry. C. Azure Service Health reports Azure platform incidents and maintenance. D. Microsoft Entra ID provides identity and access management. Exam tip. Microsoft Purview is for data governance. Azure Policy is for governing Azure resource configurations. Here comes question number 377. Next, let's move into cloud benefits. Here's the scenario. A company is comparing a move to the Azure public cloud against building a new on-premises data center. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Now check statement 1. Moving to the public cloud typically requires a lower upfront capital expenditure, CapEx, than building an on-premises data center. Now check statement 2. The public cloud provides identical hardware configuration options to those available in a custom on-premises data center. Now check statement 3. The public cloud provides the elasticity to automatically scale compute capacity when business demand changes. For statement 1, choose yes. The cloud shifts spending from upfront hardware purchases, CapEx, to pay-as-you-go operational expenses, OPEX. For statement 2, choose no. Cloud providers use standardized hardware SKUs. You cannot order highly specific, custom hardware builds in a standard public cloud environment like you can on-premises. For statement 3, choose yes. Elasticity and scalability are core benefits of cloud computing, allowing rapid response to changing workloads. A helpful shortcut is this. Public cloud computing replaces upfront capital expenditures, CapEx, with operational expenditures, OPEX, while providing immense scalability. Let's take a look at question number 378. Take a moment to review this scenario. A financial analyst is mapping IT spending models as the company migrates to Azure. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. The pay-as-you-go, paid, pricing model is a form of consumption-based pricing. Statement 2. Routine monthly payments for consumed public cloud services are classified as capital expenditures, CapEx. Statement 3. The consumption-based model aligns with an operational expenditure, OPEX, financial model. Statement 1 should be marked yes. Paid means you are billed only for the resources you actively consume. Statement 2 should be marked no. Monthly cloud usage bills are operational expenditures, OPEX. CapEx involves buying physical assets upfront. Statement 3 should be marked yes. Because you pay for services as operating expenses over time rather than buying hardware upfront, it is considered OPEX. The main takeaway is on-premises hardware is equal to CapEx. Public cloud consumption is equal to OPEX. Now for question number 379. This question takes us into scalability. An Azure virtual machine is running at 95% CPU utilization. The administrator decides to address this by performing a scaling operation. Which action is an example of vertical scaling, scaling up? The choices are: Choice A. Adding to more identical Azure virtual machines to a load balancer backend pool. Choice B. Changing the size of the existing Azure virtual machine to a SKU with more CPU and RAM. Choice C. Deploying the application to an additional Azure region. Choice D. Configuring Azure front door to route traffic to a secondary data center. The best choice is option B. Changing the size of the existing Azure virtual machine to a SKU with more CPU and RAM. The main reason is vertical scaling, or scaling up, involves increasing the power or capacity of a single existing resource, such as upgrading a VM to a larger size with more processors or memory. Now let's rule out the other options. A. Adding more virtual machines is an example of horizontal scaling, scaling out. C. Deploying to another region is geodistribution. D. Routing traffic is load balancing traffic management. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Vertical scaling, scaling up, changes the size of a resource. Horizontal scaling, scaling out, changes the number of resources. Let's focus on question number 380. Let's focus on the following scenario. A company needs to run code when files are uploaded to storage. The company does not want to manage servers and wants billing based on executions. Which Azure Compute option best fits this serverless requirement? Watch the differences between these options. Now examine choice A, Azure Functions. Now examine choice B, Azure Virtual Machines. Now examine choice C, Azure Virtual Desktop. Now examine choice D, Azure Dedicated Host. The best choice is option A, Azure Functions. Let's look at the reasoning. Azure Functions is a serverless compute service that runs event-driven code without requiring the customer to provision or manage servers. The other choices do not work because B. Virtual machines require operating system and infrastructure management. C. Azure Virtual Desktop delivers virtualized desktops and applications. D. Azure Dedicated Host provides dedicated physical hardware and requires more infrastructure management. Azure Functions is event-driven serverless compute. Virtual machines provide customer-managed operating systems. Question number 381 brings in a useful concept. This situation sets up the main requirement. An administrator stops an Azure virtual machine from the Azure portal, and its state becomes stopped, deallocated. Which virtual machine resource continues to incur charges while the VM is deallocated? Watch the differences between these options. Option A. The VM compute capacity. Option B. The attached managed disks. Option C. The released temporary disk data. Option D. The VM operating system processes. In this case, choose option B. The attached managed disks. This works because deallocation releases the VM compute allocation, but persistent managed disks remain provisioned and continue to incur storage charges. Let's quickly check the incorrect choices. A. Compute billing stops when the VM is deallocated. C. Temporary disk data is not persistent billable managed disk storage. D. Operating system processes do not run while the VM is deallocated. Here's a useful exam tip. Deallocating a VM stops compute charges, but persistent resources such as managed disks can still be billed. Now let's examine question number 382. We are moving on to cloud benefits. First, let's review the situation. A web application is deployed redundantly so that it remains accessible when one component fails. Which cloud benefit is demonstrated by minimizing downtime through redundancy? Here are the possible answers. Choice A. High availability. Choice B. Scalability. Choice C. Predictability. Choice D. Manageability. Go with option A. High availability. High availability uses redundancy and resilient design to keep a service accessible when a component fails. B. Scalability adjusts capacity to changing demand. C. Predictability concerns expected performance and cost. D. Manageability concerns provisioning, configuration, and monitoring methods. Exam tip. High availability minimizes downtime, scalability adjusts capacity. Let's continue with question number 383. Let's start with the scenario. You are categorizing Microsoft services by cloud service type. Match each Microsoft service to its cloud service type. The left column contains left side choice 1, Microsoft Dynamics 365. Left side choice 2, Azure App Service. Left side choice 3, Azure Virtual Machines. The right column contains choice A on the right is Software as a Service, SaaS. Choice B on the right is Platform as a Service, PaaS. Choice C on the right is Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS. Use these pairings. Microsoft Dynamics 365 goes with A. Software as a Service, SaaS. Azure App Service goes with B. Platform as a Service, PaaS. Azure Virtual Machines goes with C. Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS. Here's why. Dynamics 365 is fully managed application software. App Service provides a managed application platform, and Azure Virtual Machines provide infrastructure where the customer manages the guest operating system. A helpful shortcut is this. SaaS delivers finished software, PaaS provides an application platform, and IaaS provides virtualized infrastructure. Question number 384. Here's what is happening. An Azure Virtual Machine scale set automatically adds instances when demand rises and removes instances when demand falls. Which cloud benefit does this capability primarily demonstrate? Option A. Scalability. Option B. Predictability. Option C. High availability. Option D. Governance. The answer here is option A. Scalability. This is the best choice because scalability is the ability to increase or decrease resources to match workload demand. Automatic scale-out and scale-in are examples of horizontal scalability. The remaining options can be eliminated because B. Predictability concerns forecasting performance and cost. C. High availability focuses on maintaining service uptime during failures. D. Governance uses policies and controls to meet organizational requirements. The main takeaway is scaling out changes the number of instances, scaling up changes the capacity of an instance. Question number 385. The focus now shifts to Azure File Sync. A company has an on-premises Windows server acting as a file server for local employees. They want to centralize these files in Azure while keeping frequently accessed files cached locally on the server. When you install the Azure File Sync agent on the on-premises server, to which Azure storage service does it synchronize the data? Here are the options. Option A. An Azure file share. Option B. An Azure blob storage container. Option C. An Azure Data Lake storage container. Option D. An Azure queue. The right response is option A. An Azure file share. The main reason is Azure File Sync is designed to centralize an organization's file shares in Azure files. It synchronizes data from an on-premises Windows server directly into an Azure file share, allowing the local server to act as a fast cache for active documents. Here's why the alternatives are not suitable. B. Azure Blob Storage is object storage and is not the target for the Azure File Sync agent. C. Data Lake is used for big data analytics, not standard SMB file share synchronization via Azure File Sync. D. Azure Queue is for messaging between application components. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Azure File Sync extends on-premises Windows Server file servers by synchronizing data to an Azure file share. Next up is question number 386. Here's the scenario. A developer needs to run a lightweight, isolated background task packaged in a Docker container. They choose to deploy it using Azure Container Instances, ACI. Azure Container Instances is classified as which type of Azure service? Review the options. Choice A. A compute service. Choice B. A storage service. Choice C. A networking service. Choice D. An identity service. The answer here is option A. A compute service. Let's look at the reasoning. Azure Container Instances, ACI, provides processing power and memory to execute containerized applications. Therefore, it is categorized as a compute service, alongside virtual machines and app service. Now let's rule out the other options. B. Storage services persist data, for example, Azure Blob Storage. C. Networking services provide connectivity, for example, virtual networks. D. Identity services provide authentication, for example, Microsoft Entra ID. Virtual machines, app service, functions, and container instances, ACI, are all classified as Azure Compute Services. Now for question number 387. The focus now shifts to storage redundancy. Consider this situation. An organization is comparing Azure storage redundancy options by the breadth of failure protection they provide. Arrange the options from the narrowest location protection to the broadest geographic protection. These are the steps you need to order. Item 1. Geo-redundant storage, GRS. Item 2. Locally redundant storage, LRS. Item 3. Zone Redundant Storage, ZRS. Here's the correct sequence. The first step is Locally Redundant Storage, LRS. The second step is Zone Redundant Storage, ZRS. The third step is Geo-Redundant Storage, GRS. This works because LRS keeps copies within one physical data center, ZRS copies data across availability zones in one region, and GRS additionally copies data asynchronously to a secondary region. Here's a useful exam tip. LRS protects within one data center, ZRS spans zones, and GRS adds a secondary region. Next, question number 388. Scenario. Your development team wants to implement Application Performance Management, APM, to track page load times, exception rates, and user behavior in a live web application. They decide to use Application Insights. Application Insights is a feature of which broader Azure Management Service? Options. Option A, Azure Monitor. Option B, Azure Advisor. Option C, Azure Arc. Option D, Azure Service Health. The best choice is option A, Azure Monitor. Application Insights is an extensible application performance management, APM, feature of Azure Monitor. It is used to monitor live web applications, detect performance anomalies, and diagnose issues using analytics tools. The other choices do not work because B, Azure Advisor provides best practice recommendations for architecture, cost, and security. C, Azure Arc extends Azure management to on-premises and multi-cloud environments. D, Azure Service Health provides alerts and guidance when Azure service issues affect your environment. Exam tip. Log Analytics and Application Insights are both core components of Azure Monitor. Here comes question number 389. We are moving on to VM scale sets. Here's what is happening. A company needs to deploy and centrally manage many identical virtual machines for a web application and automatically adjust the number of instances as demand changes. Which Azure service should the company use? The choices are: Option A, Azure Virtual Machine Scale Sets. Option B, Azure Virtual Desktop. Option C, Azure Arc. Option D, Azure Functions. In this case, choose option A, Azure Virtual Machine Scale Sets. Here's why. Azure Virtual Machine Scale Sets create and manage groups of load-balanced, similar virtual machines and support automatic scaling based on demand or a schedule. Let's quickly check the incorrect choices. B, Azure Virtual Desktop provides virtualized desktops and applications. C, Azure Arc extends Azure management to on-premises and multi-cloud resources. D, Azure Functions runs event-driven serverless code rather than groups of virtual machines. A helpful shortcut is this. Use VM scale sets for groups of similar virtual machines that need centralized management and scaling. Let's work through question number 390. Here's the situation to consider. A new systems administrator is learning how to manage resources in the Azure cloud environment. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement says, you must have network connectivity to the internet or an ExpressRoute connection to manage Azure cloud services. The second statement says, you must install a dedicated Microsoft client application on your computer to manage Azure resources. The third statement says, you can manage Azure cloud services using any modern web browser via the Azure portal. For statement 1, choose yes. Cloud management endpoints exist outside your local network, requiring connectivity to reach them. For statement 2, choose no. While CLI tools exist, they are not strictly required. You can manage everything via the web-based Azure portal or Azure Cloud Shell. For statement 3, choose yes. The Azure portal is a web-based, unified console that supports modern browsers on any operating system. The main takeaway is the Azure portal provides a web-based, agentless console to manage your entire Azure environment from any modern browser. Let's work through question number 391. First, let's review the situation. An organization protects its environment with physical security, identity controls, perimeter defenses, network controls, compute security, application security, and data protection. Which security model uses these multiple protective layers? Let's compare the available options. Option A is Defense in Depth. Option B is Azure Role-Based Access Control. Option C is Azure Policy. Option D is Single Sign-On. Go with option A, Defense in Depth. This is the best choice because Defense in Depth uses multiple layers of protection so that if one control fails, additional controls continue to protect systems and data. B. Azure RBAC grants permissions to Azure resources. C. Azure Policy evaluates and enforces resource configuration rules. D. Single sign-on lets users access multiple applications after one authentication. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Defense in Depth layers controls. Zero Trust continuously verifies every access request. Question number 392. Next, let's move into Azure regions. Here's the scenario. You are preparing a presentation on Microsoft Azure's global infrastructure. You need to explain how Azure organizes its physical facilities. Which statement accurately describes an Azure region? Review the options. Choice A. An Azure region contains one or more physical data centers that are connected by a dedicated, low-latency network. Choice B. An Azure region is a single data center found in every country where Microsoft has a subsidiary office. Choice C. An Azure region contains data centers connected by a high-latency network spanning multiple continents. Choice D. An Azure region is a logical boundary for role-based access control, RBAC, assignments. The right response is option A. An Azure region contains one or more physical data centers that are connected by a dedicated, low-latency network. The main reason is an Azure region is a geographical area on the planet containing at least one, but potentially multiple, data centers that are located in close proximity and networked together with a dedicated, low-latency regional network. The remaining options can be eliminated because B. Azure regions are not located in every country with a subsidiary, they are strategically placed in specific global locations. C. Regions use low-latency networks within a specific geographic perimeter, they do not span continents. D. A region is not an Azure Resource Manager authorization scope. RBAC can be assigned at management group, subscription, resource group, or resource scope. A region is a set of data centers deployed within a latency-defined perimeter and connected through a dedicated regional low-latency network. You have completed part 10 of the AZ-900 practice question series. Continue your preparation by opening the complete playlist and watching the remaining parts in sequence. Please like this video, subscribe to Tech with Kaushik, and enable notifications for more cloud certification exam preparation content. Share your score, questions, or feedback in the comments. Thank you for watching. See you in the next part.